Welcome to part 2 in this video series of how to manipulate CAD models in Calypso. So again, I'll create a new measurement plan, and just like in the last video, I'll go CAD, CAD file, and load. I'll hit the file filter and go to all files, which is the last option, and then open up the air motor assembly.step. Alright, so the last video was all about how to manipulate individual CAD models. So let's say that this air motor assembly that we have here is actually a part with a fixture that's surrounding it. So we created our assembly in SolidWorks and we imported it, but the problem is if we look at measurement plan simulation, if we turn on our CMM here, when we import our part with our assembly, again, I understand this is just an assembly. This is not a part with a fixture, but let's pretend for a moment that it is a part with a fixture. This part and fixture is way up in the corner of the machine. That is not going to be helpful to us if we try to do collision detection or over travel detection, which is called check measuring range. Either one of them will error out because when we try to move our machine position in our machine system, if we go to 0, 0, 0, all axes, that is as high as we can get right there. Our probe just can't get, well, actually that's weird looking. Let's try that again. Our probe just can't get to where it wants to get to. There we go. So you see our probe is already maxed out in travel. Our probe is way up here at the origin where our part is. Let's turn off shading for a second. There you can see the probe. Right, so the probe is at the origin and the part is also at the origin. So that's not helpful to us. So we certainly could take, I think there are 16 pieces in this assembly. We certainly could take all 16 of those pieces and move them individually. We could do that using the position tab here. If we wanted to, we would uncheck drag base alignment. We would click on position here. We would turn on probably center in this application, and we click on the bottom of that model. And then we click on the bottom of the plate. And notice that that's going to drop that one part on there individually, right? It also changed the orientation of that part relative to the assembly. So if I hit apply, I've now actually lost the positioning of my fixture relative to my part. Now again, I know that this is not a fixture and a part, this is one assembly. It was just a convenient model that I already had on Blackboard, so that's why we're using this for the sake of this video. But the idea stands for when you're importing your own fixtures and assemblies. If you move the parts individually by using this Modify CAD model menu here, it's good for certain functions, but not so good for moving multiple parts at the same time. So you might say, hey, have you tried clicking on a part and holding control and clicking on another? Well, I'm holding control right now and I'm clicking on multiple parts and that's not working. You might think also, hey, Control A works in other parts of the software. Can we do Control A? That doesn't work either. Trying that right now. You might say, hey, can you hold Shift and click on different things? Well, I'm doing that now. That's not working either. Perhaps we could come into the transformation dialog, and that might have different properties. Well, that's a good guess. Well, let's try holding control, and no dice here either. All right, we'll try the same thing with Shift, no dice. We try the Control A, doesn't work. So maybe you're clever and you come over here to the Hierarchy tab and you say, hey, we can select things individually. Maybe we can hold Shift here and grab everything. Yeah, that sounds great. We'll grab all of that, and then we'll come over here to the Transformation tab, and it drops your selection. Then maybe you say, all right, well, we'll come to Hierarchy, and we'll click on the top one, and hold Shift, and click on the bottom one, come over to Positioning, and it loses your selection again. So as far as I can tell, I've tried just about every combination. Perhaps I'm missing something, but I suspect I am not. In my digging, I realized that if we close out of this, we've been getting to this through the Measurement Plan Simulation tab, but we can also come up here to CAD, and we can go Modify CAD Entities, and that gets us to the exact same dialog where we just were with transformation and positioning, create geometry, and all that good stuff. Well, that begs the question, why do they even have modification versus modify CAD entities. That seems like that's kind of one and the same. Well, it turns out if you click on modification, and you got to be really careful what you click on here because this combine CAD features is not going to do what you want. That'll take your hierarchy window and combine every single CAD model you have into one. So I'm sure there's an application for it, but it's not an application that I want here. So I only bring this to your attention because I just did that when I was preparing for this video, and I had to restart from square one. So watch out for that. It is, again, this software leaves quite a lot to be desired in terms of the interface. It's also very click sensitive. So you click on that once, all of your entities get combined. So be careful. All right, but CAD model transformation is actually what we want. And hey, cool. So you would think this menu opens. It's a lot simpler than the others, so I like that right off the bat. You would think you can select individual CAD models, but there is actually no selection through this menu. This is going to move every single CAD model that's in this file all at once. Now, I have the machine displayed here, and the reason I do is if you turn the machine display off and you manipulate something in this menu, it's not obvious what happened because it's going to bring your base alignment along for the ride. Right? So if we turn our machine back on, right, we want our machine displayed for this, we can see that if we want to set this part on the base plate, well, first of all, we're missing one of these pieces here because I already moved it. But let's say we want to set this bottom piece right here with the two tapped holes. Let's say we want to set that directly on this base plate, or you know what? Maybe we want to move this to meet up with its friend here. Well, if that's the case, it looks like we want to move this about the x-axis. So we're going to come down here to rotation. You can either rotate the part in X or Y or Z, or you can translate the part in X, Y, or Z, or you can do a combination of these. So you got to be careful with this as well, because if you leave this populated, you do multiple moves in the same dialogue, it will leave the old stuff in there and it will do it again. So again, a lot to be desired on the interface side of things. Also, you would think you'd have a preview here, but there is no preview. This is live. So as soon as I hit apply, notice that took every single CAD file that I have control of. It didn't rotate the machine because that's not considered a CAD file, but it did rotate every single CAD file in this assembly, and this CAD file that I had already dropped down here. Let's turn our machine off for a second. That CAD file, it's now way over here in no man's land. Okay, so if you want to rotate every single CAD file that is in this file all at once, that is the CAD modification and CAD model transformation. That's what that's used for. Okay, now I'm going to do a sidebar here and I'll come into modify CAD model, or if you like, you can go modify CAD entities here. It's the same window, right? I want to come in here to hierarchy and I want to show you that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are many different CAD models that are in this file, right? I'm going to show you what I did by accident before. I'm going to go CAD, modification, combine CAD features. Okay? That didn't seem like it did anything, right? Well, we'll come right back into the same hierarchy window where we were before, and now we have air motor assembly step. And the problem with this is, now if we try to move one of these entities without moving other entities, using either the position or the transformation tab, we can't do that. And as far as I know, that seems like it'd be a great way of being able to move everything over all at once, and I agree with that. The problem is now we have a whole bunch of surfaces and it's not clear which surface is which. We can't select them individually and it's hard to explode them back into their original CAD files. They're now just filed away however they're filed away. Okay, so the key points from this video series so far is if you want to move a part individually, it's probably easiest to just open up your measurement plan simulation window here and then come down here to modify CAD model. You can use positioning or transformation to either orient those files quickly or to be a little bit more descriptive about how you want to orient them. Keep in mind this center checkbox here and the drag base alignment checkbox here are very important. And for positioning, this center checkbox here and this drag base alignment checkbox here are also very important. So individual movements, that's the way to do it. Right? use this modify CAD model. Now, you can also come up here and go CAD and modification and CAD model transformation if you want to move every single CAD file all at once. I do just warn you, be careful about this combine CAD features button here, because it doesn't tell you what it's doing. It does it almost immediately, and it's kind of irreversible. Control-Z or undo will not work there. So, word to the wise, save and save often if you're manipulating CAD models directly inside of Calypso. This is one big reason why to avoid moving CAD models directly in Calypso. Right, so CAD model transformation gives you a very stripped down version. It only gives you the ability to move the entire assembly. It does not allow you to move individual components. You can translate an X, Y, or Z. You can rotate about X, Y, or Z. It moves everything all at once. So let's combine what we learned. Let's do a close all. Sure. So I did not save that file, and I'm just going to create a new measuring plan. And I'm going to do a couple of simple moves just to demonstrate that I understand the concept here. So first things first, I'll come out to Blackboard. I'll come to the course information and then the air motor folder. And then I'll download this air motor assembly.step for a step file. I'll go CAD file, load. I'll hit the file filter. I'll come down here to all files. I'll grab that air motor assembly and say open. That'll bring in the entire assembly all at once. I'll turn on my shading. I'll go to Planner, Measurement Plan Simulation, and I'll bring this over, and I'll hit the pull down here and go to Base Alignment. And then I'll turn on my machine. All right, so the first thing I want to do is orient this model so that this entire assembly is sitting on this base plate right here. I want this base plate to be face to face with this base plate here. And as we saw earlier in this video, it might be tempting to come in here into the modify CAD model command, but that would do it individually. So what I actually want to do is CAD and modification. Watch out for this. Combine CAD features. Make sure you deliberately click on CAD model transformation. And what we actually want to do in this case, we want to rotate about the X axis. So we'll hit the pull down in the X and we'll go 90 degrees and we'll hit apply. And notice that that orients every single CAD model in the orientation that we want. And now we have the mystery of figuring out how far do we want to move this thing. Well, our origin is right there. And let's say we want to move the section of the part that's pinned to the origin right now. Let's say we want to leave that alone. And we want to move that location so that it's centered on the table. So in this case, I'll turn on our table here. All right, so I clicked on this button to turn on the table. I'm going to open up the joystick here, and I'm going to move based on the machine system. And I'll move the X to about half of the travel, which is about 10 inches, because the total travel is 20 inches. And then in Y and Z, we have about 19 inches. So I'll move the Y to about minus 10 inches or so. And then I'll move the Z down until that probe just about touches the base plate. And the easiest way to see this is to just get the view from Y minus. And I'm just going to move this down until I see that it is touching. So it looks like it's minus 19 inch 685.0. So we're going to go X plus 10, Y minus 10. Z is going to be even more precise. It'll be Z minus 19.685. Right? So I'll X out of this, move machine, and I'll do that. I'll do X10. Be careful, this is a Y minus 10 and a Z of minus 19 inch 685. Here's where you also have to be careful, right? If you leave this angle in here at 90 degrees, it will do that command again. So we have to set that back to 0, and then we'll hit apply. And notice that this moved the part and the table. Let's turn our machine on though, and let's see if it did indeed move that table. No, it didn't. That is one of those hokey things about Calypso. If the base plate is on, it will move that as if it's a CAD entity. So you might have to just toggle your CMM back on and then turn it off, and then your base plate will be back in the same location. Why does it do that? I don't know. The best I have for you is that it's a software glitch. Okay, so I like that. One last thing I want to do, I want to change the orientation of this, so that way these weights are pointing X positive. Why do I want to do this? Well, I'll just make something up and say that the blueprint says that those weights have to be pointing X positive. So really, I'm using it to teach you how to use this menu, just driving home the concept that you do have to clear these values out if you want to do multiple commands, or you could just X this out and open it right back up. In this case, I would want to rotate about the Z axis, and I want to rotate at an angle of 90 degrees and then hit apply, right? And notice that that moved the part. It seems that the part rotated about its own center. It looks like it threw it way back in space here. Let's turn our machine on and then turn our machine back off again. And yeah, sure enough, that did move the part out in space. Here's another thing I really do not like about the way this CAD window works. It seems to be a little bit glitchy here. Now we're going to have to kind of take our guess as to how far we need to move this. Well, that distance there is about 20 inches. I would just move the probe. However, the probe's not going to be able to get that far back because we're outside of the machine's travel. I'm guessing we moved about 20 inches, so I'll set this Y to minus 20 inches. Making sure this angle is set back to 0, and in fact all the other values are set back to 0, and I'll hit apply here. Looks like the base plate moves with us. Looks like that was a good guess. Looks like we moved right to where we want to move. Let's turn our machine on, and then turn our machine back off, turn our base plate on. All right, everything is refreshed, everything's good to go. So I know that's a bit hokey. Again, this is one of the reasons why you might not want to do this in Calypso. It is a little bit hokey. It's live, meaning as soon as you do it, it's done. There are no undos. So if your middle name is Danger, this is a great way of doing this. Here's another thing I recommend to you. I recommend that you go File, Save, and save often. Basically, save after every command. And if you can, save as a different name, like save it as whatever the file name is, -1. On your next save it as whatever it is, -2. And that way, even if you have 15 files, by the time you get a successful CAD transformation, well, you can just delete the first 14 and then delete that dash number off the end of the file, and nobody knows the difference. That, to me, is cheap insurance, and it's a wise thing to do. All right, so we have our model in the correct location. The last thing that I want you to do is to show me that you understand the difference between moving all of the models using CAD and modification CAD model transformation. I want to make sure you know how to use this modify CAD entities window as well, which can be found down here. Either way is fine. And all I want you to do is to put this face of the cylinder on top of this face of the upright, and I'd like it to be centered, and then we're going to rotate it 90 degrees. All right, so for this, we're going to click Positioning. We're going to click on the model itself. I'm sorry, I already messed up a click here, so I'm going to X out of that. I'm going to do a File, Save As, and I'll just drop this in my Downloads folder. Right, there's some good advice right there. Save and save often, save under a new name. This way, if I totally hose myself at this point, I at least have a checkpoint. We'll come back to our measurement plan simulation. We're going to turn on our base plate only so we see what's going on here. And we'll open up our Modify CAD. Click on Positioning. We'll click Position, Center, and uncheck Drag Base Alignment. So those are the checkboxes that I missed. I'll click on the back of this model, and then I'll click on the top surface here, and notice that this does actually give me a preview. It does only move one thing at a time. I'm happy with what I see, so I'll say Apply. All right, so that looks good. Now the last thing I want to do, I want to take this one part only, and I want to rotate this 90 degrees so that this bore over here is pointing the same way as the hex on these weights. All right, so I'm going to grab this model, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. For this, that's a good application of transformation. Right, so for transformation, I'm going to click on Center. Looks like I have the wrong thing highlighted, so I'll click on the cylinder instead. I'll go to a wireframe view, and I'll turn shading off. So now I can see my trihedron over here. Looks like in this case, I want to rotate 90 degrees about the z-axis. So I'll highlight that. I'll type 90. Do not press enter or apply. That will just do whatever you told it to do. We'll hit tab instead. And now we get a preview and we can see that that rotated backwards from the way I wanted to. So, okay, no big deal. I just want a minus in front of that 90. We'll hit tab again. And it looks like in our preview tab, that is what I wanted. Turn shading back on and we'll hit apply. And this is exactly what I want to see. All right, so let's move our probe out of here because we're about to do a photo shoot. For you to get credit for this assignment, all you have to do is follow the steps outlined in the last section of this video, and then take a snippet of this. So we'll close out of this. Here we can see our base plate. Let's actually turn on our machine so that way we can make sure that we're oriented correctly. And I would like you to take just a snippet of this. So we'll open up our snipping tool here. We'll do a new and take a snippet that is about the same dimensions from about the same angle as this. And then you'll hit the pull down at the top. You'll write in red pen, and then you'll just put your initials, right? So the whole idea of you writing your initials in this is if I didn't have you write your initials, then you could just watch this video and take a snip of the last frame. That's pretty clever, yeah, submit that. But I want to make sure everybody's doing their own work. So I require you to save this snip as a JPEG image and then submit that to Blackboard and you'll receive full credit. So thank you for watching this video series. I will see you at the next one.